Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Ellis from Central Texas College PD. She has 31 years experience in law enforcement. I am really looking forward to this conversation. So welcome to the show, Chief Ellis. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I am looking forward to this as well. I think what you're doing for law enforcement is great. So thank you for what you're doing to promote positivity and wellness among the rank and file and chief.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. When we spoke offline, you shared a lot about yourself and your background, and I think that you are super inspiring. I'm really looking forward to sharing that with our listeners. And I think I told you this offline, but you are, I think, the fourth or fifth woman that I've had on the podcast, and I've interviewed almost 250 chiefs across the country so far. So I'm really, really excited and grateful that you're here today talking with us. And I was hoping that we could first start with maybe just a little bit of background. So, anyone who doesn't know you, who are you? Anything you want to share about yourself personally, professionally, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Um, I've been in law enforcement, like you said, for 31 years. I've been a chief for eight, um, which is a pretty good run so far. I enjoy it. It's been my life's passion. Got started in law enforcement after an active shooter event at the courthouse that I worked. I wasn't in law enforcement yet. I actually worked for the county elections department. And one day this guy came in and I don't ever say his name, but he came in and some people were killed, several others were injured. And once everything was, cleared and we were cleared to go back to work, we were told that one of the bailiffs failed to pull his weapon and stop the shooter. And that just didn't really sit well with me at all. And, someone who's supposed to be sworn to protect above all things, we serve our fellow man, but we also, it's a protect and serve, protect comes first. And he failed to do that. And so I did everything I could. I self-sponsored through the Tarrant County College Police Academy, and that was 1993. And I got my first job in 1994, and I haven't looked back. It's been the most challenging, rewarding, and fulfilling career anyone could ask for.
Wow. So I know when you told me you were in your 20s, you were really young when this happened. You were not in law enforcement at all. And then you experienced this active shooter event, and that fueled you to enter into this profession. Does that still fuel you today, or do you feel like your why has changed over the last 31 years?
The why hasn't changed. The lens is different.
Mm.
It changes as you promote, but the why is still absolutely the same. I still have a strong desire to protect others and to serve my community and to serve my internal customers too, which is my staff and the people who show up every day to work with me. And so that's still very important. It's still at the top of my list.
Yeah, I love that. I love that statement of the why is the same, but the lens is different. And I think as we get experience in life and experience in our profession, we do start to see things from different lenses and lenses of experience. So I really liked that statement. I'm gonna take that because I agree with you that, you start to see things differently as you start to, go through your life and your career. How did you get through that experience as a person? Was there anything that helped you to kind of reflect and be able to process going through that particular experience?
The active shooter experience,
Mhm.
um, not really. I didn't seek any outside counseling or um, resources like that. It was, it, it fueled me with anger.
Mm.
So that was the emotion I carried with me, and it fueled me with the anger, which in turn provided the determination that I needed to make it through, the basic police academy. And that's what's carried me through that. And then, just throughout my career, that innate desire to not let that happen again on my watch.
Yeah. Do you know what I find really interesting is I think that people talk about, kind of having that chip on your shoulder or having that determination as a bad thing. And I don't think it always is. I actually think that there have been many things in my life that I have been able to accomplish because I have that, because I had a little bit of that anger. You have a little bit of the grit to keep going. And I think sometimes it's talked about in a bad way, but I actually think that sometimes we accomplish the biggest things because we have that fueling us.
Well, and it's part of it is confidence. But one of my favorite sayings, I heard it in a training some years back: confidence can coexist with humility, and
Mm.
that's one of the traits that I think is important, especially in this profession. We need to be confident in our abilities and our knowledge, um, but we also need to stay humble.
Yeah, wow, I like that too. Confidence can coexist with humility. And I think too, like sometimes we think that two things can exist at once, and I believe that two things can be true at once for a lot of different things. It's not all or nothing. And I talk about this in wellness a lot. You could be 100% in your career, but you could also be 100% in your life. You could be 100% confident, but also know how to take accountability and to have humility. I think sometimes we think in kind of black or white or that one track thought process, but I do think that two things can exist at one time.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it's as a leader in this profession and as a chief, you absolutely have to project that level of confidence, but you don't have to be cocky.
Mm,
Um, it's okay to help your officers. I was at the range this morning, and I was out there helping do stuff to prepare for the shoot, just like my officers were, and that's what good leaders do.
yeah. Yeah, I think that as we get older too, there's a bigger fear, especially when you become an expert or you become, higher up in your craft or in your organization. There's almost a fear of messing up or a fear of showing weakness. And I think that sometimes that humility or that vulnerability, that those things get a bad rap because people are afraid that that's going to make them look weak. And in turn, I think that it actually makes you relatable and people want to follow you and they see you as a human and they're going to be more behind you if they view you in that way. But I think that it's human nature, and I've been guilty of this too, where like I want to be perceived as the best, and I can't show any of the cracks or, I can't show that maybe I don't know something, and I had a teacher, a mentor really early on in my career that told me that it is better for someone if they come up to you as an expert and they are asking you a question and you don't know the answer, it is better to say, I don't know, but let me find out than to try to like make it up and try to pretend like you are all knowing. And that really stuck with me because I think that people appreciate when you are kind of on the ground with them and saying, hey, like, I am. And again, two things can exist at once. You can be really good at what you do. You can be an expert. You can be in leadership. And you can also not know everything. And that's okay.
Well, if you come into this job thinking you know everything, it's time to retire. And I
Mm,
learn something new all the time. And if I'm all knowing, then I'm certainly not going to be open to learning something new.
yeah. Yeah. I am a big fan of having a learner's growth mindset. I think that that is the biggest. I'll talk like the kids do. It's the biggest flex, if you if you can can grow and you can be trainable, I think that is a huge positive quality to have.
Yes, we should all be teachable. I mean, there are so many life moments, not just in our professional lives, but in our personal lives as well, that are teachable moments, and you have to be open and receptive to those moments.
100%. I'm going to give you a little bit of a shout out because, anyone who's listening and doesn't know how amazing you really truly are, you are the first female to be elected as the Texas Police Chief Association president in the past 30 years, and you will be entering into that role in April.
I'm not elected yet. That actually comes through a vote through membership, and that'll be our conference in April, March 30th to April 2nd. Shout out to PPCA for the conference. Um, so yes, I'm slated to be the next president of the largest association of chiefs of police in the United States.
That is incredible. And I even love how your response to that was still so humble of like, not yet, but I will be of the biggest organization in the country. How does that feel? And what was the road to get there?
Yeah, so the very first role I had with Texas Police Chiefs was as a member of the executive board. So we have the board of officers, which includes the elected officers plus past presidents, and then we have the executive board, which is committee chairs and people in different types of roles. So my first role was as a committee chair, and I remember the very first ever meeting I walked into was in a room with all of these names that I had heard for years, past presidents and the movers and shakers in TPCA and those people that you really look up to in the profession and especially in the association. And I was scared to death. And I even told them that night at dinner. I said, "Man, that's intimidating." 'Cause I was the only female. There was one lady from the TPCA staff that was in the room, and me, and it was exceptionally intimidating. And like I said, I was totally scared. But I have to say that they were very welcoming. The president at the time sat down and had dinner with me and a couple of other gentlemen, and just made me feel very welcome and very at home. So that's what started it all, and that's how um, things progressed for me. I stayed late. I helped after the meetings. I volunteered to do what needed to be done. And then in 2022, I had a couple of past presidents approach me and basically they said, "Well, your name was mentioned. So just keep doing what you're doing." And so I didn't get into the chairs that year, but then in 2023, I actually made it to the chairs, which is how we ascend in your organization to president.
Wow.
A um, great gentleman that helped model the way for my progress.
I had I think this fits really perfectly because I had someone recently, they said that every day is an interview, that every day you should think it's an interview. And it wasn't just professionally, it was also, like within the community, people are looking at you and they are noticing the work ethic that you have. They are noticing, how you treat people. Are you kind? Are you, and that to me is what popped up when you said that. You were like, "Wow, I am very intimidated, but also very inspired, and I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to stay late and I'm going to do all these things." And it probably at that time wasn't like for any reason other than to be helpful. And then people noticed that, that was the interview in a way, where they noticed the hard work and they noticed the dedication. And I think a lot of times people see other people at the top and they don't recognize the hard work that it took to get there.
And it was never in my mind um, that I would be in this position, to be the next president of TPCA. That never entered my mind at that time. Like you said, it was just the right thing to do.
Right.
You see people struggling to do something, you just offer to help. But no, it was never in my in my thought process at all.
Yeah, I love that. I think that hard work pays off always. But I also love how you talked about the mentorship and how there were a lot of people who helped you to get there and kind of paved the way. Was there anything that you learned through mentorship that kind of stuck with you or something that you've passed on to others?
Something I've passed on to others. I've always said leave it better than you found it. And I feel like I've done that at every agency that I've worked for. But The ones that, I didn't have a lot of females in my career that were ahead of me, especially within TPC. I did work for one female chief, and she was very bright, very brilliant. Um, but through TPCA, there were really no women ahead of me. Chief Childress, who was the first female president of TPCA, was in 1996, and while she was still on the board, she didn't make all of the meetings, and so I really had to rely on my brothers to, I mean, the first meeting I went to that I described earlier, I had to call and ask someone, okay, what do I wear? Because I mean, it was a dude ranch, so am I supposed to be the whole business casual, or do you dress dude ranch, right? So that's just the kind of, but you have to be willing to do that. And this is kind of what I was thinking for my words of wisdom, but I'll go ahead and share that now, is a lot of chiefs are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to, like you said earlier, appear weak. And so they wind up being siloed. And so if I could offer words of wisdom to the next generation of law enforcement as they, pin on the badge and then ultimately promote, um, they'll be siloed. Um, Online training is great, but I learn as much or more from my peers when attending a training class than I do from the actual material. It's so important to seek out those relationships and make those network connections, because when you really need help, those are the people that you're going to call.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that because, I think that we forget when we talk about wellness and we talk about advancement and growth, we kind of forget about leaders. We forget about chiefs, we forget about command staff. It's for the younger officers, the younger generation, which is also important. But I think that it's an important reminder that no matter what role or rank you have within the organization, you are important, and it's important for you to prioritize your wellness, your advancement, your growth, and it's okay to, like we said before, it's okay to not know everything. And like you said, and I think about this a lot. I'm glad that I don't know everything. How
Oh,
boring would that be if like every day you're like, well, I know it all. That's it for me. And then it's Groundhog's Day every day because, for me, like
absolutely.
I'm excited to learn new stuff, and also maybe you already know something, but you can learn a different way to look at it, a different perspective, a different way to teach it. There's so many things to learn. And I hope that, everyone who's listening has a little bit of almost that like childish energy. When we were kids, like we were not afraid to learn new things and to like fall and, scrape our knee and get back up and keep going. And so I think it's an important reminder that no matter where you are in your career, it's important that you prioritize yourself, your growth, and your wellness.
To your point about looking at things differently, I used to have a sign in my office that said 4 plus 5 equals 9, but so does 6 plus 3.
Mm. Yeah, there's not one way to do it or one way to look at it. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think sometimes, even just asking ourselves, is there a different way? Asking ourselves those questions or asking each other those questions, and I think that that's why it's really important to have a community of people who you can talk to and bounce ideas off of and try to understand, how else can you, what other way can you reach nine? There's a lot of different ways to reach nine. You know, we could divide, we could multiply, we could add, we could subtract, so what are those things that we can do? And when you have those different perspectives, I think it also does make you a better leader because now you know how to teach that to everyone within the organization, and you know that everyone's different, they're going to learn different, they're going to see things differently. So I like that poster.
Yeah, I had it for a long time. So that,
When you and I talked offline, and actually you taught me something new. I didn't know this. Obviously I know that women are not the majority when it comes to law enforcement, especially leadership. But you said that 3% of women make up police chiefs. So, of all the police chiefs, 3% are women. And it's a goal of yours to mentor and support other women within this career. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe some things that you found along the way, some of the challenges of, being, I'm going to put like in quotes, but it's also true, a minority within the profession. And maybe some advice or mentorship that you want to pass on to other women.
That is correct. It's about 3% nationwide. In Texas, we have 2,800 law enforcement agencies. We're a big state with lots of different agencies, and we're holding steady at about that 3% that we talked about. Um, One of the things that I did when I was committee chair for Texas Police Chiefs Association was we created a mentorship program for women, and that was very successful as those we called them proteges, as those proteges moved through the program. And so they were paired with other leaders in the state. We didn't have enough females to match them all with females, but we had some great brothers in blue that stepped up and were great mentors to the proteges as they worked through the program. That's one of the things that we've done as a state. And I was very happy and honored to be a part of that program while I was that chair. It still exists, but kind of in a different form as it moved forward. And the biggest thing is just to be available. I try every time I see that a new chief has been appointed, a new female chief has been appointed, try to always send a note card with my contact info just so that they have it. Because truly, even for our brothers, it as you get higher in the chairs as chief, ultimately the chief, it it gets real lonely. The circle gets very very small. And so that's why, again, those social networks are so important. Uh, just to have that network when you have those questions, because there are things that come up that they don't teach you in chief school. So it's nice to have those experts in their field.
Yeah. I started this podcast because I was hearing a lot of I wish statements from other leaders. And a lot of it was in the context of like, I wish I would have known this earlier. I wish that I would have had a mentor that would have led the way. I wish that I would have prioritized my wellness or I would have known. And I kind of heard that a little bit, of like, man, I wish I would have learned some of these things, but maybe you didn't have the resources or, maybe there wasn't the awareness yet. And so having these conversations around, how can we set others up for success? And it's to the point that you made earlier, leaving it better than you found it. What are the things that, you can put in place today that's going to make it easier or better for other chiefs, other women who are coming up in this profession? I wish that I had someone who was a mentor for me too. It is really difficult when you feel like you're on your own island and you don't know who to reach out to. And, obviously as a chief, like you said, it gets smaller. And so it's important to lean on. And I know Texas, especially, you guys really talk to each other. You guys are really connected as police chiefs over other states that I've talked to. And I find that to be something that's actually really cool. But I love that you take it a step further and you reach out to other women across the country and you're like, hey, I'm here. And if you have any questions or anything comes up, like I've been through it and I will be a support system for you.
And it starts very early. I mean, for female officers, there's certain things that women need to carry with them at certain times, and the gentlemen don't always think of that. There's just so many different stories from females that you're like, well, why didn't they think of that? But it's just a different mindset that they have. I actually sent a survey several years ago to a bunch of female chiefs, and I asked them, what are some of the things that you have heard as you come up in the ranks, but specifically, if you could give me three or four things that you've been told after becoming a member of command or as a chief. And those comments from these chiefs, some of them were so off the wall that made you laugh, but I read things such as, well, you're too feminine, or you're too masculine, or one of the things that I was told early on is you don't have the right temperament for the trade. Well, I don't even know what that means.
Mm,
So it's the whole host of things that we're told, and I think it's important that we are there for each other, that we don't embrace the queen bee thought process, and that we I actually posted it on my LinkedIn the other day. Be the one that straightens another woman's crown without telling the world it was crooked.
mm, I like that a lot. And, I can really deeply relate to that. And anyone who's listening that has not experienced that before is probably male because we've all as women have felt that. And it is so disheartening to me when, you know, it's almost harder sometimes to connect with other women. There is a little bit of that competitiveness or, cattiness sometimes. And um, for me in my career, I've had a lot of level setting and, backhanded comments and, and I'm always like, why can't we cheer each other on? Why can't we want each other to succeed? I love that. How can we straighten each other's crowns without telling other people that it was crooked in the first place? And my question for you, and you kind of answered this a little bit earlier, is, you know, how do we get that message across to support each other? And it doesn't have to just be women or men, this could be just as a whole. But one of the things that I hear a lot is this challenge of peer pressure. It's not always outside forces. It's not always, maybe lack of support from leadership. A lot of times it's the pressure or the judgment that you get from people who are peers that is the most damaging because, you don't want other people to judge you or to make you feel a certain way, but yet it still happens. And so, how do you get that message across, or how do we get people to not just look out for themselves, but to look out for others too?
Well, I would hope that, especially people in this profession, I would hope that we're doing that anyway, because that's about serving others. But that's not always the case, sadly. I think you use the word peer pressure. I would say it's reverse peer pressure. And I think that those that silo themselves and don't network with their peers, I think they're more at risk of being that way than those that do. Because when you hear how a chief struggles with whatever the issue is, and then when you face that same issue, or if you have already faced that same issue, you can empathize with what they went through and how they responded to it and learn from what they're telling you. And I've done that countless times. One of your past guests, Chief Hunter from Kilgore, is a very dear friend. And I just earlier this year called him with a situation, and he was very insightful and very thoughtful. So he's part of my network that I rely on heavily.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's an important reminder, to all of us because we're all so busy and we have things that are going on, but you got to lift people up. Especially if they're people who you care about. And, I know that you all care about each other, and it's not just within your organization or within your state, it's all across the country. You're all a family, right? And how can you support each other and lift each other up, especially like when we're busy? And it's difficult and I'm sure everyone has had this experience. I know I have, where you are struggling and you reach out to someone, and it takes a lot of courage to do that, and then that person dismisses you or doesn't have the time for you, and then it makes you not want to do that again, and it makes you want to go kind of inward, because you put yourself out there. And so, as the people who are receiving those questions, I think being more mindful of, are we showing up for people when they need it, when they ask for it? Are we encouraging that vulnerability? Are we encouraging that courage and that strength to ask for help or to ask questions and to not be okay sometimes and need that support? And I think that we forget that we have that ability to influence other people's days and lives.
One of the things that Texas has also done to help law enforcement, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but we also have a peer network, a statewide peer network for law enforcement.
Yeah, I do know about that actually. And I think you are the only state that I know of that has that.
And we've also recently implemented across the state the Blue Chip program.
Hmm.
It's numbers on it where officers can call and actually speak to a professional mental health person.
Yeah. What do you think is still the biggest challenge when it comes to law enforcement wellness as a whole?
I think it's the intrinsic motivators.
Mm,
We can provide the gym for our officers. We can um, give them pointers on how to eat healthy or bring in nutrition experts. But it truly has to come from within um, for them to be successful.
yeah, I agree with you. I was in Texas when this happened, and I had someone ask me, I was doing like a presentation with leadership, and someone asked me, how do you get someone who doesn't want to do something, for their wellness to do it? And I was like, I don't know if you guys are gonna like this answer, but I was like, I don't. Um, I think the reality is that it can't come from external. I think that support can come from external. I think awareness and education can come externally and should come externally. But when it comes to action or implementation, that has to come from within. It's that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And so the biggest success that I have personally found, and of course, everyone's going to be different, but I try to ask people their wellness why. Why is it important for them to be well? And I do think that that looks different for everybody. I think everyone's going to be motivated by different things, but there has to be something that motivates you from within. I ask these questions a lot. I hear a lot of different things. I hear from the younger generation, they want to prove themselves, they want to promote. It's more like performance, they want to make sure that they can keep up and that they can, like, get certain, um, advancements in their career. Maybe they want to be a detective or they want to be a canine handler or whatever that is, maybe chief one day. And then, for the older guys and girls in the career, a lot of times it's like, I just want to make it to retirement and, I want to go crawl around with my grandkids or, whatever it is. But generally speaking, I think if we can dissect those things, so I think if we can look at all of these different whys that we're hearing that are important to people intrinsically, it's really longevity. Really, like if you get to the core, I think it's longevity, but those things fire that longevity. And so I like this saying a lot. Um, You've heard this expression, if not you, then who, right? And so my question is, if not for you, then for who? So if you're not willing to do it for you, if you're not willing to take care of yourself and prioritize yourself for you, then who are you willing to do it for? Is that your family? Is that your community? Is that your peers? Who are you willing to get out of bed for to prioritize these things? And I think that you have to have that internal fire for you to take action. And because if I stood up in front of a room and said, you should do this because I think it's important and it's not important to you, it's never going to happen.
No, it won't.
And I've learned throughout the years. It wasn't like I came out the gate perfect, you know. I thought for a long time, I was like, maybe if I stand on a soapbox and I talk about the stats and the facts and like why this is important, maybe that'll get people motivated. And I realized that those things are great. Like education, awareness is great, but at the end of the day, each person has to find what motivates them in order to do it. And so maybe if we ask those questions more often, maybe that'll, get people to drink. I'll put that in like, but I agree with you. I think that it's really hard. And I think it's also hard when you are busy, it's hard when you're juggling a million things. It's hard when you already don't feel great. Maybe physically don't feel really good. Mentally, you're really stressed. It's hard to take that extra step. And I think that's why it's even more important to have some sort of motivator that helps you to create the discipline to do it because you may never feel motivated to do it. But, if you can at least like light that match to start and then create some more discipline in there and then that'll carry you through.
Agreed. You just have to find a fitness line, the wellness.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think the future looks like, or what would you like to see in the future? I know you're entering into this new role in April and you guys are doing a lot of things. I know wellness is a huge conversation. So, what are some things that maybe you guys are working on, or some things that you hope to accomplish in the future?
I know one of the things that we are looking at is highway safety for officers. There's a lot of construction projects, and I'm sure your state is no different. Um, but we've noticed an alarming trend where there's no shoulders and there's concrete barriers, and it's really unsafe for the officers. So if there's a major crash that happens within those barriers, number one, how are they going to get to it with no shoulders? Um, a lot of times they're doing it from the opposite side, so then that creates a hazard as well. And so that's one of the really big things that we're looking at right now is just highway safety for our officers. Uh, Too often they're injured in traffic. We're going to have to pick that one.
It's
Too often they get injured working crashes, just in the safety of the motoring public is also in jeopardy in these issues. So that's one of the things that I know we've been talking about for the next year.
yeah. No, I love it. Well, I really appreciate your time. I do want to ask the question. I know you already gave words of wisdom before, but it's the signature. We have to do it. I have to ask the question. And this could be for anyone. This could be words of wisdom for the younger officer. This could be words of wisdom for a woman who is coming up in this profession or leadership, but what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's maybe earlier in their career? Something you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way?
Don't be afraid to ask the question, whatever the question is. And I know especially it's hard for women when you're intimidated um, because you're outnumbered, you know, or it's more women and you don't want to ask the question in front of other women. I mean, because that gets us too. Um, Ask the question, whatever the question is, ask the question um, because nobody's going to bite your head off, you know. What I'm trying to say is sometimes we're so intimidated by our surroundings that we don't speak up and don't ask, for clarification or for help. Don't be afraid to ask the question, no matter what the room looks like, whether it's a room full of male colleagues or mostly female colleagues. Ask that question for clarification and, don't back down.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on here. I'm really honored to have you on the show. So thank you very much. And I really wish you all the best in your future endeavors and successes. So thank you again.
I'm excited. You'll have to check back in with me after next April.
I will. I'll put it on my calendar and I'm going to check in and be like, you okay? You hanging in
Yep.
there? Well, thank you again, Chief Ellis. I really appreciate it.